Why would we wander away from Nova Scotia? We'd just get lost and die in Amsterdam. It's like those stupid woolly mammoths.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Unbelievable, the podcast where I tell my good friend two unbelievable stories from history, one real, one fake.
And the burden to decipher which is which falls to me.
That's right. I am fit as a baker's dog, Luis Mejia, joined here by my good friend, fit as a butcher's dog, Kurt Danner. Ooh. And we're here once more to tell some good tales of history, and who knows, maybe one of them will be real. I sure hope one of them is. How are you feeling today, Kurt?
I'm feeling great, and to be honest with you, Luis, I may be built like a butcher's dog, but I handle like a baker's dog. I mean, come on now.
You're an emotional baker's dog.
Emotionally baker's dog. Yeah. I'm feeling great. I'm ready. I don't know why. I'm just on some good vibes today. I'm ready to do this with you.
We're back, as we are every single episode with this podcast. And since today I am going to be the one telling you these two stories, these, some could say, unbelievable stories from history, Kurt.
Trademark.
Pending. Since that's going to be me today, I will let you tell me a quick little fun fact to calibrate my truth sensing abilities for today. So, Kurt, do you have a fun fact for me today?
I sure do. You know, a little information aperitif, and then when we feel our tummy wumble, we will go to the two big stories. Luis, you may know that Britain's legislative branch is Parliament. I feel like everybody knows about Britain's Parliament, but what you may not know is that it is the oldest surviving legislative body. It was founded in 1801, and just for fun, to put that in perspective, I've pulled up the Wikipedia page of 19th century inventions. So here's some things that Britain's Parliament is older than. The accordion, wow, who would have thought that? The rubber band,
nice.
Okay. Dynamite, I feel like I kind of thought we always had dynamite, but I guess that's fairly new. The typewriter, nail clippers, mouse traps. I mean, like, it was a dark world when Britain's Parliament was founded. So, true or false, Luis? Is Britain have the oldest parliament in the world, founded in 1801?
I don't believe it was founded in 1801, Kurt, because didn't it burn down, like, in the 1600s? Like, in 1666, it straight up just burned to the ground. They had to rebuild it. So I'm going to say no. I'm thinking it's even older than that, Kurt. It is far older than this. Certainly older than me.
Well, you use the wrong method to get the right answer, Luis, because as far as I know, people understand Britain's modern-day parliament to have been founded in 1801. However, that is not the oldest surviving continuous legislative body. That title, in fact, goes to Iceland's national parliament, which is the Althing, or Althingi, was founded in 930, making it 1,093 years old. No, not 930 the year, AD.
Very interesting.
BCE. Or not BCE, CE.
That's interesting. Well, you know, I failed this task successfully, so I'm okay with that. You know, as long as I'm able to cross the finish line, no matter what the method is, that's fine by me. That's nice.
That's true. You're a man who lives by the ends justify the means.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah. Strict adherence to that. But anyway,
with that energy, let's get on.
Now that we've gotten as utilitarian as possible, let's get on with some of our stories for today. I've got two of them, as we tend to do, as I tend to do, and as you tend to do sometimes. Two stories.
That is the format.
And we're gonna move across the world a little bit. We're gonna start off this very first story with a little place named the Netherlands.
Ooh.
You're familiar with the Netherlands, right, Kurt? You've heard about them before?
I am.
Yeah.
I did. I have spent exactly 27 hours in the Netherlands.
Interesting.
And it was a good 27 hours.
Interesting.
I had like a long layover.
All right, so yeah, you're familiar with the Netherlands. It's certainly a place that exists in this world.
It is. It's out there.
It is out there, and you know we love the Dutch. Everyone loves the Dutch because they're all remembered for their weed, their famous Amsterdam weed, their red district, their canals, their well-known East India Company.
I was gonna say,
yeah, the important company of theirs, and they somehow were able to grow to be one of the biggest empires across the world, especially considering they're such a small country. And now they are well known for one thing mainly, and that is their bicycles.
Nice.
As we know, the Dutch love their bicycles. So much so that it's one of the few countries where there's more bicycles than people. There are more bicycles than cars. Really, they've tried to migrate to be a bicycle utopia to set an example for the rest of the world, which I'm, to be honest, very jealous of or envious of. I really want that in my day-to-day life, but alas, Mexico still car dependent.
That sounds good, but I just feel like a little shiver run down my spine when I hear the fact that there's more bicycles than people, because I'm like, what if they decide like to give the bicycles voting power and then they're outnumbered by the bicycles, you know? I don't know. I just feel like, what if we're setting up for our future dystopia to be, our overlords will be bicycles? At least they'll be Dutch. That'll be fun.
The Dutch bicycles. Yeah, they'll be our masters, but we won't understand them. Maybe everyone.
They won't understand each other either.
No, they'll have no idea what's going on. Maybe we're freaking out too much about AI gaining sentience and the singularity and whatnot. Maybe we should be worried more about bicycles, but that's beyond the point. Now, while the Netherlands are currently well known for their bicycles and their bike culture, during the 40s, 50s, and 60s, much like in the rest of the world in the post-war period, there was a huge boom for the automotive industry. We all know this. In the U.S., it happened with the construction of just all the highways, same in Mexico, same in the rest of Europe. Particularly the Western world really saw a boom, and the Allied countries saw a boom in automotive industrialization. The Netherlands saw this too, but they decided to change that. They realized that they're such a small country that they really do not need all of that infrastructure solely dedicated to automotive transportation. So in the 1980s, there was a new revival of cycling in the Netherlands, particularly in Amsterdam. Because of this, the city all gets turned around. All of the highways are changed to become pedestrian pathways. They are adapted to, instead of being streets for small cars, they become just bicycle lanes for most people. And that's how the country, if you go to the Netherlands now, especially Amsterdam, you'll notice that the city is just canals and bikes. That's it.
Right.
But because of this, because there are so many damn bicycles around Amsterdam, in the 1980s, 85, 90s, they decided to start a project to build underground parking structures for bicycles. Because at the end of the day, if you have a lot of bicycles on top, they're cluttering the street. So they decided to move the paths underground.
See, this is what I'm talking about. It's getting dangerous with the numbers here.
Yeah, you start digging the bicycles, you're going to get some gnarly trees.
We're going to have to expand for living room to fit our more bicycles.
This is the bicycle Lebensraum? Interesting.
I mean, it feels like that's where we might be going. I'm getting worried, Luis.
Well, don't worry, because who would have thought that in the pursuit of building these bicycle underground utopias, we would be faced with some massive discoveries that would alter our knowledge of the human race on this planet as we know it.
Ooh, that's always fun.
All right. So there were 3 different things that were discovered by them starting to dig these underground spots. The first, they started digging and they came across some bones, some pieces of bone fragments, but peculiarly large pieces of bone. Naturally, they called in archaeologists, geologists, and all the type of people that would be interested in this. Also paleontologists and things of the sort. And they started digging and found all these different remains of bones. Not a whole lot, but what they found out is that they found remains of mammoths, which I guess tracks. Because if we think back to the last ice age, the mammoth lived around that area of Norway, near to like the global north, right? Like near to the Northern Sea, near to Finland, Norway, Denmark, close to Britain. Certainly there were mammoths.
Up there in the icy bits, you know?
Yeah. The icy bits now were used to be even bigger icy. They were not bits. They were just ice. Now, this would have been all well and good until you figure out that this specific mammoth was a woolly mammoth, which is very exciting. It's the mammoth we know. However, woolly mammoths have a very particular feature, or not feature, or I guess a very particular trait, is that they are endemic to Far East Asia and North America. At no point have we found this woolly mammoth remains anywhere other than North America and like Russia, like Eastern Russia and Eastern China. So this meant that this part of the world also had woolly mammoths, which rocked everyone's world. Certainly rocked my world when I learned about this.
Yeah. You know, it's funny because it's like answers because it's more knowledge, but it really just raises more questions because then you have to wonder, like, was there a population there, or was it like that they died on the migration? That also seems weird that they would, because then they would have to think about like filling in all the gaps in between, because even if whether there's a population or they're migrating, there should be woolly mammoths in other places in between, you would think. Or maybe they've just been there forever. I don't know.
Now, here are some theories that came up from this. One of them basically says a woolly mammoth got lost. Like a pack of woolly mammoths got lost and somehow they made it there. That is a theory not very well respected, but I think it's just the funniest one.
Somebody had to try it, you know?
Somebody had to say, I mean, what is science if not the sharing of hypotheses, right? You know, we don't know anything. It could have happened. But that theory has been thrown away. It's a non-zero chance. Now, this other man hypothesized something I think equally as funny and maybe not as deranged.
Okay.
He says that this is a type of woolly mammoth that is slightly different to those of North America, that these are more adapted to the part of Northern Europe that these remains were found in. He does build upon just the guy that said there were 5 mammoths that lost their way, but he follows through with it saying these mammoths did go through and start creating some sort of hybrids between the mammoths and mastodons of Middle Europe and woolly mammoths and ended up in that part of the world.
Interesting.
Now, what is one feature of the Dutch that is very recognizable? I don't know if you ever seen soccer matches featuring the Dutch national team.
Oh, sorry. I thought that was rhetorical. No, I haven't.
No, I don't know if you have. Well, Kurt, if you've seen a game between Dutch people and a game between, say, Mexican people, you'll notice that when the Dutch play, the field looks so small.
Okay.
Because Dutch people are so huge. They are abnormally big. As in tall, big, strong. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. But every single Dutch person I've met, every single person that I've seen on television that has been Dutch, they're known for being very big and strong and
built.
very, very tall. Yeah, they're strong people, you know, that in a way they resemble a lot of Scandinavian people of that area. One of the theories that this man built was that this available protein and this available meat in the area allowed the proto-Dutch people, or the people that would become Dutch later on, to be bigger and stronger than some people. Because they got
access to the mammoth meat.
Exactly. They've got the mammoth meat, and thus people from Northern Europe are slightly, I guess, physically taller and bigger than people closer to the Mediterranean. So that was that theory.
Interesting.
To this day, no one really knows. They just know they found a mammoth bone, and they were really excited. It's still being discussed to this day as we speak. Moving on, as this whole drama with the mammoths were going on, they kept studying the ground, and they found large traces of different sorts of jewels, and then also gold. And gold that had essentially dissolved into the ground, or it was not a vein of ore, of gold ore. It was just seemingly gold flakes scattered across this soil.
A little bit of gold seasoning.
Yeah, little gold flakes just thrown on there for flavor. Now, I don't know if you know about this, but if you throw small enough pieces of gold into the ground in soil for long enough, gold does tend to, I don't know if the word is dissolve, but it degrades over time, kind of like cloth. It doesn't completely disintegrate, but it goes apart, and the movement of the soil really interacts with the chemistry of gold.
Okay.
Now, naturally, scientists were confused at this. Why is there so much gold? And unusable gold, by the way. It's just puffs of gold on there. Well, turns out they sent this chunk of soil, and they sent it over to a lab where it was carbon dated to around the 1100s CE.
Okay.
Okay, so year 1100s, they've got a particular date of when this chunk of soil is from. Mm-hmm. Now, this is where I just get amazed by intersectionality that comes with science and the intersectionality that is in the academic world. Because these scientists in the lab were like, we have a chunk of soil, a chunk of dirt with just gold scattered through it, but we don't know what to do with it. And historians, specifically French historians, went, haha, I've got it. Some French historian comes in and says, have you guys heard of our chanson d'Antioche? Everyone was very confused and asked, what the hell is a chanson d'Antioche? This historian's name was Michel Lavelu.
Nice.
Which, great, very French name.
Good.
But Michel Lavelu goes, oh yeah, chanson d'Antioche. This, of course, as we all know in France, it's a piece of literature written in around 1129 or 1140. Okay. Somewhere in between there, it was written by a monk belonging to the royal court of France at the time. It is around 9,000 lines written in stanzas for the French court, which in a satirical way, in a rhetorical way, it all recounts the happenings of the last 10 years of that period of time. And this was meant to be shared at public events, to be shared at a banquet. At this point, some historians even say that this was a gift to the king at the time to be displayed during his dinners.
It was like ancient Mad Magazine.
Yeah, but recited by some dude. Imagine you're all sitting together with your friends, and some guy says, "Guys, I brought my Mad magazines. Do you want me to read it out loud to you?" Wild night with the boys.
True.
Now, some of the things that the Chanson d'Antioche says, it's, of course, famine. It's the mid-1100s. Of course, there's going to be famine.
It's a classic.
Some tales of agriculture, some tales of battles, some tales of wars. The unending just...
A lot of fanfare in there, you know.
Yeah, a lot of colors, a lot of dirt, a lot of people working the fields, classic 1100s stuff.
He's checking all the boxes, They had all kinds of battles going on, all kinds of agriculture. It's really playing to the people,
It's really everything you could want. And that in itself is quite interesting on its own. However, it gets a little crazier when you start reading more into the Chanson d'Antioche, and you realize that he talks about an economic collapse that happened in France at this point. In 1127, 1127 CE, there was such a high level of inflation in France, or in the territory that would then become France, due to the attacks of Scandinavian people that failed, that when they came in and tried to attack, they were defeated so much or so well that all their wealth stayed in France. This caused an inflation never before seen in France, which meant that people were being very, very, very lax about their expenses, to the point where there was a surplus of gems, of jewels, and of gold. So much so that, much like Germans in the 1930s that would line their walls with cash as insulation, or use their money to warm their furnaces, people in 1127 would use gold and other precious stones and stick them in the ground in order to make the soil stronger to avoid potential landslides.
Wow.
And in this part of the world, like the Netherlands, where there are so many rivers, so many canals, landslides tend to happen. Or not necessarily, I don't want you to think landslides like in mountains, but just movements of the earth that happen when there's a lot of rivers around, and it's not as solid as it could be. Yeah. It happens here in my hometown, my home state. There's a lot of water, there's a lot of rivers where the land there's a lot of sinkholes, there's a lot of land that moves, that shifts, that you need to put stones inside of to make it a little denser. Right now, or these days, they use some sand, at least here in Veracruz. But in that day, they said the coins were so strong and so plentiful and so useless that they decided to start putting those gems and stones and gold into the ground to prevent these landslides, to put them in the banks of rivers to protect crops.
Wow. That's just out of interest, like not to get too meta on you, but whenever you know this as well because you're on the other end of it sometimes. When I'm listening to the story, like I'm enjoying it, but also in the back of my mind, I'm thinking like, did this really happen? And just that fact right there of like we're putting gold and gems in the ground to prevent erosion. That seems so insane. But then at the same time, like you're talking about in Germany, people literally did burn paper money to burn their furnaces because it was that worthless. So it's like. I'm struggling so much to believe that, and at the same time, there's a equivalent of it that I know to be true.
Yeah, and there are stories of people dumping gold during high inflation time. Yeah, because even the Romans used to throw gold into the river whenever they just had too much. So they started doing this in the Netherlands.
Romanomics, best inflation control.
You've got too much money, throw it in the ocean. Doesn't matter. What else are you gonna do? And so, interestingly, this was the very first and only evidence of what the Chanson d'Antioche said in that poem.
Wow.
So when people would originally read the Chanson d'Antioche, they would say, that's whack. That's kind of stupid.
Cool story,
But that's why this Michel Levalut was so excited. This was for the very first time, this niche-ass book that nobody knows but him finally gets revealed.
He's been sitting on this for years, just waiting.
Bro, 1987 was a year that changed the life of this man. Seriously.
It's all downhill from there, but to be honest with you.
It hasn't
chasing
not.
That high
the light,
forever.
The light has not, the sun has not shone on this man's face since 1987. Seriously, he walks with his head down every day, knowing nothing will ever top this. And yet, the discoveries in this part of Amsterdam are not finished, Kurt. Wow, Get ready, because the ground studies that they did for the gold also found that in these pieces, these chunks of gold and gold soil and all of that, they found remains of dwarf horsetail.
What?
They found fossilized remains of hear me out, dwarf horsetail. I will read you the Wikipedia entry for the dwarf horsetail. To start off, it's a plant. Okay. It's a spreading evergreen perennial boasting thin, wiry stems that bend, coil, or twist into a contorted tangle. It's a type of grass, okay? Now, a type of grass that belongs to the horsetail family, but this is the dwarf horsetail.
Okay.
Now, this may not seem too exciting for you, Kurt.
It's just a lot to digest. I didn't even know there was a horsetail family, and now I'm having to learn specific members of the horsetail family.
This was dated to be from around 800 CE. Okay. Which you're thinking, all right, yeah, we found some grass from 800, some fossilized grass. Woohoo.
Big deal.
This is wild when you realize that the dwarf horsetail only exclusively grows in northeastern Canada, particularly in Nova Scotia.
Okay, hang on, don't worry. Got this one figured out. Couple dwarf horsetail grasses wandered off from the pack.
Yeah, they found themselves over there. Now, when you hear 800 CE and northeastern Canada, particularly Nova Scotia, and in relation to Northern Europe, does that ring any bells?
It just makes me think about Vikings, I think.
You're on the right track, Kurt, because indeed, Leif Erikson was a Viking, was a Nord, that was said to have arrived in Nova Scotia, one of the first Europeans to have arrived and actually seen the land that is now America, or that was then known to be the American continent.
Right.
He found this place around 1000, late 900s. So he was born in 1961, dead by 1020. So somewhere in between that period, he found Nova Scotia. He established a little colony there, and you're kind of starting to trace some lines around that and then bringing it back to the dwarf horsetail.
Right.
That's when Leif Erikson allegedly first arrived in the Americas. The dwarf horsetail remains, Kurt, are from 200 years prior to this.
What?
Which you can assume that someone else had gone from Leif Erikson's homeland or from that part of the world and gone all the way to Nova Scotia and seen the Americas and come back.
No, you know what? If they keep digging, okay, they keep digging deeper, they'll find like a big rock with some runes carved in it, and there's like a picture of like Leif Erikson being led by one of the dwarf tail grasses, and they're like, "Don't worry, brother, we'll show you the way to Nova Scotia, our colony."
He's showing the woolly mammoths in their mouths. They're just eating dwarf horsetails with Leif Erikson hanging on top of them.
We should email ancient aliens about a theory that these blades of grass were actually aliens that colonized the world.
Yeah. Well, and in all of this, that just means that there must have been some sort of previous contact much earlier than we expected. Now, the stories that Leif Erikson, the story of Leif Erikson in the Epic of Eric the Red states that he didn't really realize he was in a wholly different continent, considering in the top part of the world, the northern hemisphere of the world, the far north hemisphere, all those places are slightly closer together due to just the pole being there, and you just bounce from island to island.
Right.
You're not crossing a huge sea like if you were crossing the Atlantic or the Pacific. You're just going from one island you can see to the next one, to the next one, to the next one, until you arrive to bigger land, in this case, Nova Scotia. So he just thought he was just continuing along the North Pole. So maybe another theory speculated that, well, this happened much earlier and there had been some sort of contact bringing different plants, different flowers, different horsetails from one side of the world to the other. And all of this because the Netherlands loves their bikes, Kurt. All of these huge discoveries that in a way have redefined the way we think about contemporary history and ancient history all came up because of this fascination for bikes. And that's not all. One last thing. In 2023, just this year, they opened a second underground garage for bicycles. However, in order to not affect or disturb the research that's going on in the other bicycle place, they decided to build this one underwater.
Okay.
So they're not building it underground, it's underwater, under one of the canals. And the mascot for this company that runs the parking garage, which is a company that's jointly operated by the municipality of Utrecht and the North Rail Company, the mascot that they used for this little business that runs the parking station is a little woolly mammoth.
They must know. They have to know then. I mean, there's no other reason to have a woolly mammoth. They're in on the joke.
No. This is like known knowledge. Like this has changed academia since then. Like this is not secret information that the Dutch decide to take to the grave. Like the Dutch are sharing these findings with the rest of the world.
Wow. That's amazing. I'm just thinking, going back to your complaint that there's not more bikes in Mexico. I'm just like, who knows what they would find if only they had more bikes in Mexico. There's like maybe like a polar bear skeleton down there, and like, I don't know, some weird flowers that should only be in Southeast Asia. All kinds of stuff could be in there.
Maybe we're just afraid of what we might find.
That's true.
Right? If we start building bike infrastructure around the country, we'll unlock some hidden secrets that did not deserve to be found.
We'll learn forbidden knowledge. Nobody wants to find the human skeleton with tentacles, okay? Nobody wants to find that. Certainly not in Mexico, I'll tell you that.
Absolutely not.
It's not the worst place to find the human skeleton with tentacles, but there's a lot of better places to find it, I'll tell you that one.
So anyway, that just goes to show bike lanes save the world. I've said it.
All right.
This is the 15-minute city plan and city idea that we all deserve. We could go so much further in science had we bicycle infrastructure over cars.
maybe I'm contributing to the future bike ruled dystopia, but yeah, I think this has won me over. The Dutch trusted in the bikes, and the bikes did lead them to many fruitful discoveries.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm one over.
Bikes were their messiahs.
Yeah, I'm ready to
team
join
bike.
the bike cult. I really like that underneath Amsterdam they just had like Neapolitan prehistoric soil. It's just some mammoth bones on the one layer, and then they had the ancient gems and the gold dust.
they're seriously, I mean, it's a wild, it's a free for all down underneath Amsterdam.
A little bit of fossilized dwarf horsetail in there. Just top it off,
Who could ask for anything more?
Who could ask for anything more?
So, Kurt, for this next tale, I love my heroes. I love my main characters of history. You know what they say about how history is written by great men? This great men philosophy that people are born great and they decide the course of history. They change the course of history. Although that is not a responsible way to look at historical evidence and look at the past, it's not really correct or good, and you shouldn't do it. I get lost in the fun story of all.
And the ends justify the means on this podcast.
As I've always said, Kurt, a good story makes up for really anything.
That's true. That's so true.
And that's a lifestyle that I tend to live by. So far, it's been okay, but we're waiting for my huge downfall down the line. It's coming soon. I can feel it in my bones. But that being said, Kurt, I cannot believe I had never heard of the person I will tell you about today. And sometimes we tend to play some games here.
Okay.
In this podcast, and we're gonna this is game adjacent.
Okay.
I want you to count the amount of times this person A gets apprehended by the authorities and arrested.
Okay.
And B breaks out
Yes.
of the prison he's been sent
Yes.
in. Okay? Keep a tally of every single time this happens.
I just I just want to say I have high hopes for this because one of the favorite archetypes that I love to discover in history is just like the wriggly little dude, like they try to get him here, they try to get him there, he wriggled every time,
Yeah.
Okay, let's go. Wriggle away.
All right, Kurt. So I'm going to take you back to the year of 1765.
Good year.
1765 in Mexico, in colonial Mexico. So at this point, it's the Viceroyalty of New Spain.
Okay.
In the region of Nuevo León, in the city that would now be known as Monterrey. Okay? So in Monterrey, in 1756, we have a man born named José Servando Teresa de Mier y Noriega y Guerra.
Wow.
Okay?
They got all of them in there, didn't they?
It's 1765, and this guy is of aristocratic Spanish descent. Of course, he's going to have a long name.
Yeah.
But this is a criollo, so a man with Spanish parents born in Mexico in the time of the Viceroyalty of New Spain in what would be now considered northern Mexico. Since I'm not going to say his whole name, we're just going to call him Servando Teresa de Mier. That's how they call him.
All right, cool.
So Servando, he joins the Dominican order at 16. He becomes a priest. So we can call him what he's now remembered as Fray Servando. Fray is just like saying father. Okay?
Nice.
So Fray Servando, at 16, he joins the Dominican order. He starts his studies, his monastic life. By 27 years old, this man is a doctor of theology and a doctor of philosophy.
Wow.
He is
He's moving
a
fast.
well-educated man. He is going quickly. He is a well-educated man, of course, from an aristocratic background, so he is able to do this. And he becomes a member of the church, which, as we know, in colonial Spain, the church is the highest authority you could be. So you're a member of the clergy and you're of Spanish descent, you're on top, baby.
I know. I was going to say, this man's going for bingo. He had like a little bit of clout nobility being of Spanish descent, but then he was like, I need every single piece.
Yeah, no, he's speed-running success in colonial Mexico.
Just needs the money now.
Well, yeah, we'll get to that. And hopefully to get in good graces with people.
Yeah.
So he starts learning and he becomes a very well-educated man. I mean, all these years of schooling and all this time spent in monastic life, of course, works in his favor. However, separate from a lot of the people in that time, and especially in that cast, if we want to call it that, is that he does not really care for the viceroyalty of the New Spain.
Uh-oh, that's gonna be a problem.
Yeah, he starts developing some sort of nationalistic ideas. I mean, he's born in Mexico. He's born in this new world, and he starts to get radicalized, if you will.
He's just like looking around at all the problems in Mexico. He's like, look, we all want to find the people who did this.
Yeah, right.
I, Spanish descendant member of the church, would love to find the people who did this.
Right. And it's funny too, because of this nationalistic urge, he starts advocating for the native Mexica roots of Mexico and saying, hey guys, we're Mexica. We're the mighty people of...
Well, someone is. I don't know if he is.
Yeah. But he's very proudly saying...
You guys over there, you're Mexica. Come on.
Come on, take back your land that I may or may not have taken from you.
He's like, whoa. I dated a Mexica girl once. Come on. Hey.
I dated a Mexican college. Anyway, he grows disillusioned with New Spain and the viceroyalty and all. And you know what? For as much as we're joking for his, almost seems hypocritical approach to, I don't know, political relations in Mexico, he is a bit woke, if you will.
Yeah.
Like he sincerely, I think, is using his privilege and power and realizes that he holds a lot of privilege and power that he can then use to influence others and hopefully change the world.
Yeah, for sure. It's never a bad time or place to figure out what the right thing to do is. But it is also funny to poke fun at that, like, if he really wants to make a difference, he, speaking of bicycles, he can just put a stick in the spokes of his own bike,
Right, yeah. Well, he's about to, Kurt. So 2 years later, after he becomes a doctor in theology and etc., when he's 29, in 1794, particularly in the 12th of December, which the 12th of December is an important date for Mexico and for Latin America generally. The 12th of December is the day of the Virgin of Guadalupe. That's the day that traditionally she's celebrated. It's the day that you make tamales for your entire house. Okay, it's a big holiday.
It's a good day.
The feast day of the Virgin of Guadalupe. Now, for some time, Fray Servando had some issues with the story of the Virgin of Guadalupe.
Okay.
He's like, there's no way. This is whack. Okay, like, I'm learning about this, and I know more than you.
Okay.
I'm going to tell you about it.
What's his issue with it?
Well, we're going to get to it. So this is a man who is very educated and a very talented orator. He can speak so well. And he's also not afraid to stir up controversy. Knowing that he's not going to really get attacked for it, he decides to go off. So on the 12th of December of 1794, he goes to the Viceroy's celebration of the feast day of the Virgin of Guadalupe.
Okay.
And he, being the father, being the priest, a member of the clergy there, he says, everyone, gather around. I have a sermon to say.
Oh, boy.
And everyone gathers around, gets really excited. He essentially says, this feast day is wrong. You think it happened 300 years ago? No, it happened 1,500 years ago. And you know what? You didn't get this idea. You didn't get this message from Juan Diego. Juan Diego is trash. He didn't see the Virgin of Guadalupe. St. Thomas saw the Virgin of Guadalupe.
Whoa.
And not only that, you fools, you see these Mexica people around here? You came in here and took their religion, which actually you didn't take anything, because the Mexica were worshiping the Virgin of Guadalupe years before you guys arrived. Y'all know Tonantzin? Yeah, Tonantzin is Guadalupe. Guadalupe is an apostle of Quetzalcoatl. So actually, we should not be thanking Spain for giving us Christianity or anything. We actually should be pleased that we accepted Christianity way before you guys thought. And actually, your atrocities bringing the Viceroyalty of New Spain here were unfounded and ridiculous and never focused on the church.
Wow. And then mic drop, right? I mean, he may be completely correct, but I feel like maybe he should have eased him into it a little bit more than that. I mean, that's like a whole study course. He needed like a whole semester to get them to that point. Holy cow.
Yeah.
This man was like Death by Firing Squad any % speed run.
Yeah, right,
He's going straight for
He
it.
really is going straight for it. And, again, Kurt, he's with other members of the clergy and in personal vicinity of the viceroy. This was a bad place and bad group of people to say this to.
Yeah.
Because also, what's going on? What's huge? What's the big thing in colonial Mexico at this time?
Dragon Ball Z.
You guessed it, Kurt. The Inquisition. That's actually now. That's the great. You wouldn't say this about Goku now. You get the same reaction. But the Inquisition hears this and immediately arrests him.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
Immediately arrests him, takes him to the Inquisition house. He's fully excommunicated by the Inquisition for blasphemy and heresy.
Yeah.
And the Inquisition decides, hey, sorry, exile to Spain for 10 years.
That's pretty generous. That's pretty generous, I think.
Well, it's because he's a member of the clergy and he was well respected. Again, he knew what he was getting into. So he gets exiled to Spain.
Maybe he just wanted to go to Spain. He was like, how do I get some free tickets to Spain?
God, I want a vacation. I gotta somehow.
Like reading through the Inquisition handbook, and like nobody ever looked before. If you blaspheme at the Virgin of Guadalupe, somebody sent to Spain for free.
Yeah, you go to Spain. You'll be fine.
I found a tax loophole in the Spanish Inquisition.
You're right. So he gets sent to Spain, and he's actually restricted from reading and restricted from teaching anyone. He's like, you can't do that. We're holding you in your cell.
Like he can't read anything.
No, well, he's sent to a monastery in Spain in a locked room. Anyway,
he's grounded in the monastery.
Basically, in this space in Cantabria, Spain, he breaks out using a hammer and a chisel.
Nice.
he
Shawshank Redemption style?
He does the most Looney Tunes thing. He just breaks out of prison with a hammer and chisel. He gets out, doesn't get too far, gets arrested once again, gets thrown back into jail.
Was it like all in one go? Like big hammer and chisel? Like he just smashed the wall? Or was he working on it little by little? Or do you know?
I'm afraid the history books don't tell us that, Kurt.
Oh.
I'm afraid they don't go into big detail. But you know what? We can make up our own history. So yeah, one blow fry.
No, I think he Shawshank Redemption did. I think he had like a calendar with like a muscle car covering it up and just chiseling away.
It's just a very sexy chariot.
Yeah.
Back in the day. Just really, really sexy chariot.
The fully clothed nun, but she's still laying sideways.
Yeah, right. It's actually not a poster. It's just a parchment on top. Now, he doesn't get too far. He gets arrested again, but they do give him some concessions. They're like, okay, fine. You can
Points
stay
for trying.
Here. Yeah, like we get it why you're trying to break out. Like,
oh wow,
this probably he appeals to the Inquisition, says, hey guys, like I'm being held here for literally just citing my thoughts, I have the authority. And they're like, okay, yeah, sure, fine, you can send your appeal to the Council of the Indies, which, since he's a member of, or he's not Spanish, right, he's of the New Spain, he sends his appeal to the Council of Indies, which then sends that appeal to the Inquisition. The Inquisition says, okay, we're going to get our theologians to read your sermon. It's not blasphemy. You're fine. It's okay. Actually, yeah, they decide it's not blasphemy after some time.
Now, just out of curiosity, which part wasn't blasphemy? Can they point to the part where he wasn't blaspheming?
Can you point in the sermon where it's not blasphemy?
Show us on the manuscript where he's not blaspheming.
But somehow this man manages to get scot-free, gets excommunicated, so he's back in the priesthood. Don't worry. He was out for a couple years. He's back in the priesthood. However, he's not able to go from his prison cell because the jailer personally hates him. So he does not let him out.
The jailer's like, I read the manuscript too. It was blasphemy.
Yeah. You know what? I checked the parts that were blasphemous. I'm sorry. So anyway, because he won't be let out, he naturally breaks out of this prison, and this time he runs off. He flees to Paris.
He
goes off to France.
just through an open door. Or do we know the method this time? I assume they didn't give him another chisel.
Well, Spain in 1795 is a weird place, Kurt. Very, very accepting.
Maybe
place.
they did. Maybe they didn't have a lot going on. They were like, you know what? Let him try. We got no excitement.
He says, I'm actually trying to hone my skills at carpentry and also statue molding. So sculpture, I mean.
How will I fix the hole that I chiseled in my cell without the proper tools first?
Exactly. And somehow he leaves, goes to Paris.
He made it this time.
Yeah, no. This time he breaks out and he flees over to Paris. He says, I'm going to go there. I'm going to let things calm down a little bit.
Good. He learned from his mistakes. Gotta respect him.
Yeah. He's in Paris. He becomes a regular priest, aka he petitions to the church, to the Pope, saying, hey, man, can I not be a Dominican anymore? The Pope's like, yeah, sure, fine. Be a regular priest. So now he's just a priest. This will be important later, Kurt. Keep that in your mind. He decides to go back to Spain after being in Paris for some time. He wants to go back to Spain once the heat dies down. So he does. He goes back to Madrid. He arrives there and he hears of the rising independence movement in Mexico. Because mind you, at this point, it's 1808, 1809. The Mexican War for Independence breaks out in 1810. So this is right before that. So there's a lot of talks of independence. And Fray Servando is very excited about this, naturally. He says, independence? Hell yes. We're going to be free. We're going out. And we're going out in style. So in Madrid, he starts writing just all these treatises just putting his support for the Mexican independence movement.
Yeah, dude.
And also saying, while you guys are at it, everyone in Latin America become independent. There's no need for Spain to be your masters. You have nothing to lose but your chains, guys.
Wow. Yeah, I'm glad he's all in on it because he was like, he was preaching this before it was cool, Well,
right,
allegedly, because they dropped the charges. He was allegedly preaching this before it was cool.
Right. And he writes all of this. So, yeah, he's once again arrested for writing all of this.
How does that even happen? Did he, send the letter to the wrong place?
He's publishing it as far and wide as he goes, throughout Spain. He's publishing all of this. And
he's pissed they didn't execute him the first time, dude.
No, he's just excited that he can get away with this. So anyway.
Maybe so.
This man gets arrested, but fear not, my dear Curtis. He breaks out once again. And this time,
he's a wriggler.
As he's moving around Spain, having broken out of Spain, he gets captured again. All right, he goes right back into prison, and he gets sentenced to several years, 7 years. He serves 3 of them.
Don't bother.
Yeah. He serves 3 of them in prison. That's when he writes his memoirs and stuff. And you'd think he thinks he's just gonna be in prison forever now, because now the War of Independence has really started, and he's seen as someone that fueled the European support of it.
Oh, they really got their eye on him now.
At some point between all of this arresting, breaking out, arresting again, somehow this man managed to convince 2 rabbis to convert to Christianity. We're not exactly sure how, but he convinces 2 rabbis to convert to Christianity. To which he sends a letter to the Pope saying, check out what I did. And the Pope says, my man, let him out of prison. He can go free. He's a man of God. This man does not deserve to be in prison.
Dude, this is such a scam. He definitely is a setup. Come on.
Absolutely.
I mean, I respect him for it, I don't mean it insultingly, more power to him, but you can't trust this guy, right? There's no way.
The slimy Fray Servando is out there doing his thing. Now, when he breaks out of prison,
he's reading the handbook every time. He's like, now I'm reading I just figured out there's this loophole. You can get out of the prison if you just convert 2 rabbis. No, whatever.
2 rabbis. No one will ask any questions if you convert 2 rabbis.
Get the Pope on the line.
Right. Well, anyway, he leaves prison. And remember, at this point, it's 1810, 1813. There is a war also going on in Spain because, I don't know if you're familiar, but Napoleon invaded Spain and the Iberian Peninsula and put his brother in charge and kicked out the king and said, my brother is in charge here. Everyone's really mad about that, and including famous insurgent Fray Servando. So he leaves prison and decides to go to war against France in Spain.
Wow.
And so he starts being a soldier and starts going to war. Anyway, he gets captured and he gets arrested. Go figure.
Just a regular Tuesday for my
Just
man,
a regular
Servando,
Tuesday for him. Now, regular
come on.
Wednesday, one day later, he breaks out.
Come on. That's easy work. That's embarrassing. Like, because they had him up to 3 years, what was the longest stretch you ever did? 3 years?
Yeah, so far 3 years.
So far 3 years? Yeah. So there's one day, a week at least. I understand that, like, they don't know the nature of this man's wriggle, but still.
They really don't. They really don't. Well, he gets arrested, and this time he goes to London. He decides to head off up north to London, and he gets the way for it all. He begins working for a newspaper named El Español, which was a newspaper that had the sole purpose of inciting independence movements going on in the Americas.
That's a good job for him.
Great job. He founds this
Dream
newspaper.
job.
He is doing what he loves, writing manifestos as to why the America should free themselves from their Spanish yokes. And it goes well for him. I mean, he's in London. What are the Spanish people going to do? Here in London, he meets another Spaniard named Javier Mina, who is a Spanish independence fighter. He fought in the same war in Spain that Fray Servando did, but he's also a big supporter of the Mexican War for Independence, which is going on full force at this point.
Right.
Now, they get together, they become close friends, close buds, and they say, hey, let's go fight the Mexican War of Independence.
We got nothing better going on, right?
Nothing better to do. So they do. They hop on a boat and boom, they head to Mexico, which is deep in war. It is 1817 at this point. The war started in 1810. This is a war-torn country. There's war and guerrilla fighting and just brutalities throughout the whole country.
Yeah. There must have been something intriguing there about, like, because had Servando returned to Mexico before this, or was this the first time he was coming back since he had left?
No, this was the first time he had come back since he was exiled. So
wow.
Yeah. He was,
and originally it was supposed to be like, 10 years? So he would have known it was going to be a long time, but probably not quite this long, or that the Mexico that he would come back to would look so different.
Yeah, and he's coming back with this new energy, this newfound energy of, I've been away from my homeland for so long, and I've been arrested. I've gone to war. I know what independence looks like and what it should look like, and he goes back a completely radicalized man. Anyway, he arrives to the coast of Mexico and gets captured by the royalist forces. I mean, what else was going to happen to this man? He gets captured,
just like,
arrested.
He probably like put himself in the chains. Force of habit.
He really can't run from it. After some years, he's even transferred to Havana in Cuba, where he spends his time in a prison in Havana, which naturally, knowing my man Fray Servando, he escapes, Kurt. Now, he escapes the prison in Havana, and he goes where no one will expect him to go, to hide out. You want to take a guess, Kurt?
Wow. I'm going to guess, like, back to Mexico, back to the middle of the conflict or something.
He goes to Philadelphia. And he decides
you know what? I had not even considered Philadelphia as an option. So that's it. No one's gonna look in Philadelphia.
This man goes to Philly and hides out in Philly and says, "I'm going to stay here until the war ends." The war ends in 1821. That's when Mexico finally becomes independent, and he decides to finally head back. He gets to Mexico in 1823. Funny enough, he arrives in the port of Veracruz, my beautiful hometown, which in 1823, at this point, it was still controlled by the Spanish. The last remaining Spanish forces were still holed up here. And he arrives, naturally, gets arrested by the Spanish forces.
Luckily, like they recognize him or what?
No, they noticed that he was a Mexican man, and they're like, okay, we're not accepting these insurgents anymore.
What do you think you're doing, sir?
Anyway, the last remaining Spanish forces leave Mexico, and finally Mexico is free and independent. But you must remember that when Mexico became independent, it did not become an independent republic. It went straight from being a viceroyalty of New Spain to becoming the Empire of Mexico. Right? That's how Mexico became independent as an imperial monarchy. Now, knowing our very our very close friend, Fray Servando, he hates the monarchy. He says we should not be under the thumb of anyone. So he starts writing horrible things about the current emperor of Mexico.
He just misses being in prison, to be honest.
He does. Well, he won't miss it for too long because he gets arrested. He gets arrested, gets sent to prison. However, luckily for him, once more, this first empire of Mexico does not last too long. So the emperor gets exiled and then killed, and so he gets released. And now, finally, he can begin his life as a Mexican man trying to shape what would be the Republic of the United Mexican States.
Wow.
He becomes a member of the Second Congress of Mexico, and he represents the state of Nuevo León. Now, he goes on to write some thoughts on how to run the country and how to divide the powers between the states. And he's very much responsible for the federation framework of Mexico's current government. He is integral to the development of the federal system, the federation system that exists in Mexico. In 1827 is the year that he died. There are tales that when he died, right a couple days before, he gathered all of his close friends and acquaintances, had a party, and told everyone his life and justified all his actions. And finally, in 1827, Fray Servando Teresa de Mier eventually passed away.
Oh, no.
The man that got arrested and broke out so many times finally became a dead man known as one of the great heroes of Mexican independence.
Wow.
Now, Kurt, how many times was this man arrested? Did you keep tally?
Oh, man. I was trying, but I lost track. But I think I'm feeling like 9 times.
Final answer?
Yeah, that's my final answer.
You're actually not too wrong. He got arrested 8 times.
Ooh, Come on. I think around 5 I lost count. It was just breaking out too fast, you know?
well, he got arrested 8 times and got and broke out 5 times. So this man, incredible. That's Fray Servando, the man, the slimy man that brought on Mexican independence.
Wow, what a guy. Yeah, that's, well, I have 2 big thoughts about this. One is that I'm curious if, at a certain point, did he develop a reputation as like being really hard to keep in prison and keeps escaping? Because it like, around the 4th or 5th time he's breaking out, the guards probably are like really nervous guarding him, and then imagine them coming back and finding his cell empty, and they're like, we had one job, like we knew he was gonna try it.
If there was one man that was going to escape, it was this guy.
Yeah, like just have someone watch him 24 hours a day. That's what everyone should have done, but I don't know.
Well, he pulled the power move of getting arrested in different cities and different countries every single time.
That's true. He kept relocating. Yeah.
No one knew him. No one knew his past. No one knew his reputation as a jailbreaker.
Yeah, and he even had like a cycle, because he rotated back to Mexico. He like waited a little while, and then came back around. Yeah.
He knew.
But I was also thinking about what you were talking about before, that it seems like there's these people who are like kind of almost like they were born for the purpose that they ended up fulfilling. I think it is interesting to think about that, there's certain people who are born who are like really well predispositioned to be good at something. They're the right person to be in charge, like, the hidden depths that people talk about of like a great leader. And so when you get like this magical combination of they unstoppingly keep seeking out the thing that they would be really good at until they get into that position. Because, as much as we were joking about, like, who does this guy think he is, saying, like, we're the Mexica, right? Like, turns out he was the right guy for the job. He was, serious about, like, revolutions and people breaking free from their colonial oppressors. And, like, even when it was just straight up the Mexican Empire, he was like, no, hate it.
And I think it's important also to note that, like, whenever you mentioned, who does this guy think he is? He knew exactly who he was.
Yeah.
He knew exactly what power he could have and he could hold with all his influence and his background, and he used it accordingly, and he decided to bring it to light, right?
Yeah,
put it all on the table.
It's also interesting that he doesn't seem to have like one specific goal, or maybe not like as far as not based in a location. Like his goal is just kind of like free all the people he encounters or like liberate people. But, you know, even though he seems to keep going back to Mexico, he's also like, oh, wait, hang on. Now there's a thing going on in Spain. Or it's just like whatever's put in front of him, he's like, okay, I'm going to try to liberate this thing.
Yeah. Maybe he was just big into ADHD. Maybe the man had some undiagnosed disorder, couldn't keep still. Who knows? I feel him. Man, listen, I relate to this man like I do with most of our stories and most of our protagonists. I feel like I was born for greatness, Kurt, and so far that's it. I haven't really done anything, but I was born for it.
Well, let's you know what? Let me press you with some follow-up questions here, because sometimes you like to compare yourself to a character, and I'm curious about how deep the hubris goes here. So, do you think if you were locked up however many times, do you think you could also escape 5 times, or how many times are you escaping imprisonment?
Oh, absolutely not, Kurt. I would get arrested once and then stay there my whole life. Like I know myself. I know myself, Kurt. But I mean, who knows what I could do in prison? Who knows the wonders, the great ideas that would spark this mind.
That's so true.
Locked up behind bars.
That's so true. All right. Well, yeah,
anyway.
That's interesting. I wasn't expecting that. You're like, me escape? Never. I'll just simply exist.
Much like Fray Servando, who knew exactly who he was and the power he held. I know myself, and I know just the very soft hands I have from not doing a day's work in my life, Kurt. And I know that those soft hands will not be able to chisel and hammer their way out of any prison cell.
Especially not for the size of hole you're going to need.
Okay. Alrighty, Kurt. Well, with those 2 stories, now it's up to you, Kurt. I've told you 2 wonderful, marvelous tales, and now it's up to you to figure out which one is the true one. In case you need a refresher, the story you just heard was about Fray Servando Teresa de Mier, a Mexican or a Novo-Spanish priest man who used his authority and his intellect and his influence and his sliminess to get arrested, break out of jail about 11 times, and in the middle, make Mexico independent. The first story I told you, Kurt, in case you forgot, was the tale of the Dutch bicycle parking lots and how they are the answer to solving most of the world's great mysteries. And just because we're holding back from building more bicycle infrastructure, we could be living in a future that we cannot even dream of.
All hail the almighty bicycle.
Underground Bicycle Utopia is the name of my first EP. Well, Kurt, what do you think of these 2 stories?
Both of these stories, I really just had honestly just so much fun listening to, because there's just so many different pieces of information, and like you were talking about the intersectionality of sciences, but also there's a lot of the intersectionality of history. I don't know, they were just such a fun ride the whole time. You know, it's fun to have like one specific thing where if we just talked about, you know, how did these woolly mammoth bones get in Amsterdam, that could have been like something interesting, but no, we got, like I said, the Neapolitan prehistoric Dutch scoop. So yeah,
the forbidden scoop,
the forbidden scoop, the undiscovered scoop, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's just so much going on there, so many different bizarre things to consider, and then on the other side of it, we have, like I said, my man who is just the wriggliest boy that the New Spain had ever seen. I mean, they just, you know, I thought that he was bold, and you know, looking for the firing squad the first go around when he gave them the big speech, but I underestimated this man. I didn't know how slippery this guy was. Okay, look out. You ain't gonna get him for long, all right? I mean him
most,
or wriggle.
Most people did, Kurt. You joined the club of the people who underestimated how slippery Fray Servando was going to be.
And, you know, it's really wholesome, because it's nice to see someone who is super, super in tune with working the system, whether legally or illegally or semi-legally, but then actually wants to use that power for good. It feels like not very often do you hear a story of someone who has multiple prison breakouts and also was released multiple times because of an armed conflict or religious-based international decision, and they then went and did good things with their time after that.
hey, maybe in order to be an independent thinker as he was, he needed to be arrested and commit some crimes. Once more, going back to our theme of utilitarianism that this episode has been all filled with. So with that, Kurt, I believe it's time to go to our least favorite part of this show. Time for deliberation. Alrighty, Kurt. That's it. It's down to the truth, Kurt. We've had some fun. We've had our laughs, but every good roller coaster must also come to an end. What do you think, Kurt? Let's talk.
All right, let's talk. Well, like I said, both of them, there was just so many things going on in the story. So either way, it's pretty challenging. You know, I think I'm very suspicious of the Dutch story with the multiple different pieces, just because it feels like maybe you enjoyed the story from our previous episode so much where I gave you 3 different pieces that now you're seeing if it'll work on me. But maybe that's just my own paranoid mind.
Maybe.
What I will say is that the Mexico story, you know, I also could be falling into that trap, because you can never tell an innocuous Mexico story on this podcast, because I know that you love Mexico so much that there's so many Mexico stories, you know, so every Mexico story just turns into a game of like, you know that I know that you know that I know that you know a lot of Mexico stories, so this and that. So, you know what? Let me not try to overthink it here. I'm just going to feel out the vibes, okay? I think the number of times that this guy got out of prison is ridiculous. Surely at some point someone would have executed him, but you know what? Sometimes that's how history goes, and especially history of colonizing the New World, and where you're doing things that are crossing oceans and these big conflicts of world powers. When you're talking about, we have a war going on in Mexico and a civil war going on in Spain, weird things like this happen. People slip through the cracks, and sometimes people are really good at doing it, and they do it a bunch of times. Now, on the other side, the story of the Dutch who just can't stop finding weird things in the way of their bicycle parking lot.
Yeah. via bicycle parking lot.
Yeah. It's just got, there's so many, no pun intended, but layers here of that, like the woolly mammoth thing is weird. The gold and gems thing is really weird. And then the grass thing is also weird. And they're all weird in this way that feels very true to life, that it's like a little bit boring almost, but not like, I still am like, I need to know how that got there, but I almost don't care enough to find out.
Right. It's like one of those things
you know what I mean?
You read a news article or news headline ones that pops up on your phone. You're like, oh, all right. Woolly mammoths in Amsterdam. Cool.
Yeah, exactly. And, maybe I am also still feeling a little bit of the doubt about the gold and gems thing being buried, or gold coins being buried, even though, as I said before, there's an example I know to be true where people did basically the same thing. But overall, both of the stories feel very real, but I think that the Mexico story of our boy Fray Servando and his many wriggles feels a little bit more true to me. So I'm going with that as the true story. That's my final answer.
So Fray Servando is a Wrigley boy, and he was a Wrigley boy in real life, as you're saying?
The wriggliest fry in the Americas. Oh, yeah. Boy, did he squirm,
And boy, he did. That is the correct story, Kurt. That is true. Congratulations.
You know what?
By God.
That makes me so happy because like I said, he used his powers for good.
Yeah.
He knew the responsibility that came with his wriggling abilities.
For once, a wholesome historical story, Kurt. I mean, that doesn't happen too often.
Doesn't happen too often, and also doesn't happen too often that we believe it, because like I said, doesn't happen too often.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, no, it is true. And I told you at the beginning of that story, this is a character in Mexican history that I had somehow never heard the story about.
Wow.
It's like it's like when you think of I don't know, U.S. independence, and then someone tells you about John Jay, and you're like, who the hell is John Jay? And you figure out he was like one of the first judges or whatever.
You find out he was whatever he was, and that's mind-blowing.
Whatever
to you?
he was, and you're like, ooh, wow, that's crazy. This is like my very own Alexander Hamilton. Like, no one knew who Alexander Hamilton was before the show, and now look at it. This could be our own version, because I started reading up on this man, and it just kept coming. Like, everyone focuses on his career entering and leaving prison.
Yeah.
That whenever you read biographies or stories about him, that's all you hear about him. And you hear so little about his massive contributions to the federation system that we currently have in Mexico. He literally established Mexico and its division of powers between the states.
Wow.
He laid that common ground, which is interesting. And just a fun fact about that, he believed very much the ideas of not following the people. Like saying the people are not right. They must have representatives that are smarter than them to lead them.
Okay.
We cannot be ruled by the people, which kind of goes against everything he was doing his whole life, doesn't it?
A little bit.
But it's interesting because he didn't advocate for like a central power or a dictatorship. On the contrary, he hated that. But he said that if we're going to have a division of powers, we must do it well.
Wow.
I find it very, very interesting. And one more thing about this man. The reason I found out about him is because of my father, who told me a story about him. And he suggested, actually, that I should mention him. But the reason why
Shout out Jorge.
he suggested it is because the story most associated with Fray Servando is not his fight for independence, but rather what happened to his body after he died.
Oh.
So he dies.
Right.
About 40 years later, his body gets exhumed among other people's bodies.
Okay.
And it's completely mummified, like naturally mummified.
Okay.
And the story goes that he was put in a parish, and then someone stole it. Someone took it to Europe and then sold it to a circus.
Wow.
And a European circus was displaying this body that they assumed to be a result of the horrors of the Inquisition. So it's like one of those step right up kind of carnival rides. And it's like, look at this desecrated body. This is what the Inquisition did. Look how evil. No, it turns out his body was just mummified naturally.
This is exactly what happened to the Mexican Declaration of Independence.
It's a very similar story. And then the story goes that it was eventually sold back, and Mexico now has it in a chapel, but no one actually knows where it is.
I'll bet.
I was going to tell you that story about the circus. However, I cannot confirm that is true. As I was doing my research, it turned out that other people are saying, no, that never happened. Someone just made up that story, which is very sad. But it also made me look at the rest of his actual story, which was wild. Like the fact that this man did all that, I love him. I want my historical sung through Broadway musical featuring Fray Servando.
Yeah,
that's all I need.
I think that the whole mix up just goes to show that even after his death, he couldn't stop escaping from places.
God, he keeps getting away with it. My God.
He just had like the lingering death twitch, but his death twitch is like an entire escape act.
Yeah. Now, the other story.
Yeah,
Kurt,
tell me about that. Is there any truth?
No.
Nice.
Not at all. I was thinking of what story to tell you, and I don't know why my brain said Netherlands, the Dutch.
Nice.
And I wrote a sentence that was my prompt, and it was just, by digging up spaces for underground bike storage in Amsterdam, bogs and ruins were found that made us rethink history.
Nice.
That was my prompt that I did. I just went from it. I don't know. Let's see the details. Woolly mammoths, they're endemic to East Asia and North America. That's it.
Are Dutch people notably like tall and athletic?
Oh yeah, no, that's true.
Huh.
That is true.
Yeah, I was trying
big.
to think about that, but I was like, I can't picture any Dutch people right now.
No, the Dutch are huge. They really are.
But there's no theory for why it's not related to any. I was like, when you were telling me about this, I was like, are you going to sell me on some sort of weird carnivore diet where I have to eat only woolly mammoth?
Right. No. This is just the Dutch are big guys. Dutch are big boys.
Just chonky.
So that kind of went well with that theory. Let's see what else. I wanted to do several stories to make it seem a little more believable.
Right. I know that maneuver well.
It's a classic one. Now, the large traces of gold and emeralds, that is just nonsense that I thought was funny.
You know what? You told me so much about the degradation of gold in soil. I'm really impressed, Luis. I thought like you yourself would not have the mental bandwidth to like talk about boring dirt science for that long. Like I would have thought that if you were saying those words, you must be contractually obligated to tell them to me and not like added on your own terms.
I actually passed out during all that. I don't recall saying it. No, I don't know if gold degrades over time. I just hoped you didn't know enough about gold to disprove that. Now, I chose a random date. I chose 11/20 just because that seemed far away enough. That seemed medieval enough. And I looked up literary works in the 1000s. And I found the Chanson d'Antioche.
Nice.
Michel Lavelu, the name. I did not even write that down. That was made up on the spot.
Wow.
What sounds French? Michel Lavelu.
You know, let me reveal to our audience here a little bit like how the sausage is made a little bit, because this is an interesting distinction between Luis and I, is that there's almost nothing that I would improvise. Well, I mean, I would improvise a joke, but like details, I would tend not to improvise things on the spot. I would either have them written in the notes or like think through them ahead of time in case you ask me. But I think you quite a bit will just make stuff up on the spot. Even maybe like in the early days, like good portions of your stories would just kind of be like pieces connected by stuff.
Yeah, no, back in some months ago, even a year ago, I used to just have a couple bullet points and then cross my fingers.
Wow.
Maybe that's why my stories beforehand were better. Was I just better at that? Because now that I planned them out more, it seems like I'd found out more.
I don't know what's going on. Yeah. Maybe you just had such a confusing attack pattern before, because even you don't know what you're going to say. So how can I figure out where the story's going? I don't know.
You're so right.
But,
you're so right. This is
speaking of the discrepancy between your domination in season 1 and your an incoming downfall in season 2, our score now stands at 8-4 with me in the lead, and that's now getting dangerous close to that number of 10.
I know, Kurt. I know it's been a long season, and with that, we're coming to the end of this show. Kurt, you're winning. Congratulations! Thank you for letting me tell you these two stories, for letting me flex a little bit of my writing muscles there. Thank you for listening to this podcast. We were unbelievable. And let us know, did you guess correctly the story? Were you convinced that the dwarf horsetail somehow traveled a single seed all the way to the piers of Amsterdam? Or were you impressed by the wriggly nature of a 1700s Mexican priest? Please let us know. We are on the social media sites that you'd like to find us in. We are on Instagram and also Twitter/X. On Instagram at UnbelievablePod. On Twitter, we are at UnbelievablePC. You can find this podcast. If you listen to podcast, just find it there. We'll be there. Leave a review if you'd like. Tell your friends. Thank you once again for listening to Unbelievable. We'll catch you next time when I try to get fooled by Kurt.
And remember, invest in bikes. It'll do wonders for your archaeology program. Bye.
See ya.